I had the mic. I had the microphone muted, David. We got to do the intro again. Hold on. Hold on. I can also rectify this because this is all live. This is a new studio, and I'm working out the kinks. And I'm not David Clarke. This is David Clarke. David, roll the intro.
All right, we'll do it again.
Do it.
Welcome to SF Live, episode 244. I'm Burin Gold Corp CEO, David Clarke.
Fantastic. Now let me switch cameras here and welcome you back, or welcome you on the program.
Thank you.
It's great to see you again in person this time. You were on SF Live last week, 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago.
I was?
SF Online. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Our conference.
I don't remember this.
Our conference series. And it was a great presentation, quick 15-minute pitch running through it. I titled this video, The New Kid on the Newfoundland Gold Block. So you just listed, I think it was end of November?
End of November, that's
so,
right. Yeah.
Give us a bit, like since it's your first time on SF Live, we have a lot of viewers. Give us a quick 30, 60-second pitch of Burin Gold, and then we'll dive into some of the details, exploration-wise. Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, we've been around since 2018. We started out as a private company incubated by a Dutch private equity firm, based on a good idea in part of Newfoundland that had been underexplored. And we did, a couple of seasons of exploration, got some great results, really encouraging. And then we're able to do an IPO last year, completed our IPO in like late November. And now here we are, newly listed, and we're back on the property drilling again.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're going to get into I like starting at the very beginning. Okay, so incubated by a Dutch private equity firm. How did you acquire the project? Like how did that all come together?
Sure. Well, I guess it started like many of these stories started at over a beer at PDAC, which is where many mining stories get started. But essentially, this private equity firm, Plethora Private Equity, was looking for an idea in Newfoundland. They could sort of they'd seen that Newfoundland was an up-and-coming jurisdiction. This was kind of before the gold rush really got started properly there. So we were early off the block, and they were looking for an idea. And we were just chatting over a beer, and essentially I proposed an idea for them, or an exploration thesis for something I thought was really while exploring, and they liked it. So we just sort of shook hands, and then about a month later staked a large land position on the Burin Peninsula, which is in eastern Newfoundland. Did an option agreement with a local prospector who held some of the small claims there, and then went off to the races. So we came together really fast.
So it's a true staking story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You started from ground zero, pretty much.
Yeah, we staked actually a very large land position because when you first come into an area and if it's wide open, you stake widely, and then you go and you evaluate after. So we staked a large land position, and over that first summer of exploration, we sort of pared it down. We went, got on the field very quickly, looked at the parts that were more interesting, the parts that were less interesting, and just sort of let the land go that we didn't want, and then kept the big core of claims that we did want.
Okay, interesting. How long did you work on the project before you went live, meaning public with a company?
Well, we staked in I think it was April of 2018, and then we listed in November of 2021.
Wow.
So it proceeded fairly quickly through like systematic exploration, and then once you have those results and you start to approach the market, and then you have all the time you need to take the IPO properly, and then you back at it after.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we start talking exploration, what the plans are, and dive a little more deeper into the projects, let's talk cap structure real quick, just to get everybody on the same level.
Sure.
Can you run us through that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. As a private company and incubated by one partner, essentially, they had a large share position, and so we arranged a cross with them, for them just before the IPO to get them down to a more manageable level. Then through the IPO, they were diluted a little more. Now we're at a position where we have a really nice tight cap structure, 38.3 million shares out. Plethora owns about 24%. Insiders are at about 20%, and our strategic New Gold has just under 10%.
What attracted New Gold? Like I went through the presentation, I was like, "Oh, New Gold is in this." Like you guys are early stage. Like what's a mid-tier producer doing in there as a shareholder?
Well, I think that they're mineable resources are getting harder to come by, and especially mineable resources in good jurisdictions. A company like New Gold obviously specializes in this kind of deposit. Like this is the story they're looking for. A lot of different. Every producer has their own specialties and the things they particularly like. And New Gold, specializes in large, low grade, bulk tonnage targets. And to find one in Canada in a mineable jurisdiction would be a great asset for them. So I think they saw the technical potential of the story and wanted to jump in early. So they actually came in on a private financing round when we were a private company.
Fantastic. Okay, that doesn't happen too often, so that's really
it's
good to see. I keep saying that. That seems to be one of the phrases I keep using. See,
yeah, it is good to see because right? It's tangible evidence that a serious producer sees merit to the story you're trying to spin, right? You're trying to say we have the potential for this kind of asset, and they're saying that's the kind of asset we want. Therefore, we'll put in a modest amount. Picked up, like they did $1 million placement in us early on.
That's actually quite decent, yeah.
Absolutely, and it helped us out. We were able to advance the project and then take it public, and
to go down a little further that rabbit hole of New Gold, are they involved technically at all? Do they have? Do they see the data and what you're working on? Is there a working relationship, or is it just pure financial interest at this time?
They took early on. I had several meetings with their with GPX. They've been very supportive and been happy to give comments and advice, but they've been relatively silent partners, really.
Okay, so no data sharing or anything arrangements like that, or
not on an ongoing basis, but they're I'm approachable, so they can come to me anytime they want to talk.
For sure, yeah.
We do have have had periodic updates.
Okay. Any other institutional shareholders in there, or any other shareholders of note? Is the private equity fund still involved? I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they still own 24%.
Okay.
They're I think very supportive long-term shareholders. They really want the property be tested properly and realize value through exploration and success.
Cash position we got to talk about before talk about how you're going to spend that money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just under $6 million right now. The IPO was raised just under $7 million in total. Of that, we had something like $4 million hard dollars to or nearly $3 million, I think, of flow through. Yeah. So we have a good hard dollar treasury. Now deploying the flow through dollars back in the field.
Yeah, and you have to spend all the flow through by the end of this year. Is that right?
By the end of this year, that's.
Yeah. So that's going to go. Yeah, we'll talk about that into drilling, right? So I want to talk about that in a second.
Sure.
So we talk cash, share position, shareholders. How many shares out?
38.3 million.
Okay, super tight.
So very tight.
And,
we're just out of the gate. So.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm just doing the math in my head, like how much of that is tightly held? Because I looked at your trading volume. It was like 20,000 shares a day, 7 shares a day.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a bit of volatility in the volume.
There's not much selling right now. I mean, it is tightly held. Most of the large shareholders are not going anywhere. So it's until we start to get the results back from exploration.
That makes
we're going to be fairly low volumes.
Yeah, I saw you were one of the top performing stocks. I think yesterday or the day before yesterday. I was like, did I miss anything? Like, because I'm a shareholder as well, right? So full disclaimer. So I was looking at it. I was like, news? No, missed the news. We're still below IPO price, by the way.
Yeah.
So do you? Oh, see, okay. I wanted to follow that line of questioning for a second. Valuation at the IPO. You raised $7 million. I think the valuation level was about $20 million. I think when you came,
something like that. Yeah.
Do you think that was a bit high for where you were at? Because the share price has been.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think, I mean, when you looked at, we had a slide on our IPO deck, for example, looked at a great number of Newfoundland and Atlantic Canada comparables, and I thought we had a very conservative valuation, really. Considering the excitement that's going on.
I was going to say, if you compare it to one of your northerly neighbors on the same province, quite lofty valuation, right? So of course you're undervalued,
even
right?
If you cut out the outliers, we were still, I think very undervalued. So no, I don't think it's. Okay. I think it's a very, considering the asset, I think it's a valuation.
Yeah. No, because I'm just wondering where the selling pressure was coming from right out of the gate, right? And I know we were going into tax loss, but. Did you issue warrants with the financing? I think
there was a half warrant, yeah.
But it was fairly highly priced.
85 cents.
Yeah, so way out of the money now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, I'm trying to understand the reasoning, like why sell into this, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean,
maybe it's just a run for cash, like with the current environment or something.
I think some retail investors sell quickly just to keep the warrants and cash. I mean, you can't really know what the motivation of anybody is. All you can do is try to do what you said you would do and do a good job at it.
Yeah. Before we dive into the projects, we just jumped the cap structure hurdle. Let's jump the personnel, the HR hurdle, and talk about you. Like, how'd you come up with Newfoundland? Like that theory. Like, what was the idea behind it, and what's your background?
Yeah, well, I'm a geologist first and foremost. I come from Quebec originally, from eastern half of the country. I lived in Newfoundland for a year in So I'm familiar with the province. Love the province, love the people. I've had a lot of good times in Newfoundland. So when I was having a beer with Plethora and we were talking about ideas that they would like to pursue, it didn't take a lot of looking at Newfoundland as a geological province now. Series of potential geological terrains to explore for me to find something that I was interested in. My background in exploration in the last 15 years or so has largely been in epithermal systems, for epithermal gold. And there is a province, a geological terrain in Newfoundland, has a lot of old showings that are epithermal in origin. And it was that got me interested, because I was like, well, central Newfoundland, there's a lot of potential there. It's all orogenic, different type of deposit. And there's been sporadic exploration there throughout the 1980s. Miranda had big programs. On had big programs, lots of drill holes, lots of exploration, and now there's a renewal of interest there in the last couple of years. But the eastern part of Newfoundland hadn't been looked at nearly as much. So that was what really got me going in terms of saying, this is an opportunity because it hasn't been looked at carefully by industry. It's been described by academics. It's been described by government. Government of Newfoundland and Geological Survey of Canada geologists have spent a lot of time there. But nobody in industry had really spent a lot of time systematically exploring that belt of rocks. So that was what got me interested in that portion of Newfoundland.
Okay. You said you staked it all, right? And you staked the ground. And how much money have you spent up to the IPO date? And what have you spent it on?
We spent, in total, I think we had just under $4 million of private level funding, I believe. Something like that anyway, ballpark. Most of that went directly into the ground. We had, we did initially, the staking costs themselves are, appreciable. But you stake a large land position, you mobilize a small field crew the first year, do some prospecting, do some ground truthing of old anomalies, all that kind of stuff, pare it down a little bit. We followed that up with with channel sampling at Hickey's Pond, which was emerging as certainly the showing that we had that had the most data on it and that looked the most off the bat. Great results there. Followed that up with an IP survey. So that was a ground-based IP survey. That's another, dollars. An airborne followed after that, and then we did a 7 holes kind of proof of concept drill program in 2020, just to prove up that we had something real. And that all adds up, and then the costs associated with running an IP.
Okay. No, okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about the proof of concept model, or the drilling campaign, because you put out a decent, you actually hit a decent intercept. I think it was over 50 meters, just below a gram, I think.
Yeah,
0.7 grams.
We had a 51, I think, meter intercept of 1.1 grams. That included 10.8 meters, 4.4 grams. Okay. So it's a broad, lower grade envelope that has some higher grade components.
Okay, what is the goal of Hickey's Pond? I think that you said that's the main project. What's your goal there? Are you trying to replicate what's been happening in the north, or the orogenic deposits? Can you even reach those grades, or are you happy with a below 1 gram but bulk tonnage scenarios? What's the business model a little bit?
Sure. Well, right off the bat, I think it's really important to differentiate orogenic deposits from epithermal deposits. So what we're seeing in central Newfoundland, all the players that are up there, generating exciting news, we're seeing classic orogenic veins. So gold is hosted in quartz veins. Those quartz veins are relatively narrow, and job there, or the challenge for them, is to really knit that together and find enough material in a vein that's consistent that can be mined. So that requires a lot of drilling, because those they have spectacular grades, but they're very difficult to knit together sometimes. So they're drilling very, very tight drill patterns up there. It's going to require a lot of drilling, and hopefully they'll come up with some multi-million ounce deposits. When you contrast that with high sulfidation epithermal deposits, these tend to be large bulk tonnage open pit types of deposits. So they will have lower grades. So I think it's one of the important things to point out, and something I try to point out to any potential investor, is that we are looking for those large low grade intercepts. We're never going to generate 500 gram per ton. Okay. That's not the kind of deposit this is. But what we can do, I think, relatively quickly, is show up a good volume of rock that has solid, consistent mineralization. That's where we can add value, and that's why a company like New Gold, for example, is interested in us compared to some of the other players in Newfoundland. It's because that's the kind of thing they specialize in.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I think it's all about managing expectations in the end as well. Like retail
Yeah.
loves the flashy numbers. They love the massive high grade visible gold in the core as well. You won't get that with a high sulfidation epithermal
No, you can
system.
have high grades. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, one
but you
thing.
won't see it. It's a finely disseminated gold usually. You don't see the big nuggets usually, do you?
No, well, we do have some VG.
Oh,
Like there's
nice.
some
Okay.
VG on the
Yeah.
project, absolutely.
Okay.
And you do get there are portions of high sulfidation deposits in the feeder zones that can have high grades.
Okay.
But is it something you want to count on? Like, I mean, it's very
Yeah.
early days. Hopefully, we'll find some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But really, the business model is predicated on finding large tonnage deposit that can be open pit mined near surface. That's the overall objective. If we get high grade, it'll be gravy. It'll be icing on the cake. But it's not what the exploration model is predicated on, and it's not necessarily an investor like New Gold would be looking for. They're just looking to develop that tonnage quickly and see it develop as a mineable deposit.
Let's talk about the exploration model and defining that high bulk tonnage or high tonnage scenario.
Yeah.
And how are you approaching it now? You started drilling.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of, say, basic geology work. Like that's what I actually want to see, like the mapping, the sampling, the trenching, and all that. Run us through the model right now and where you at in that process of maybe defining an initial resource. Might be a bit early. Where you at?
Yeah, well, we started with basic characterization. You're new on a property, you show up for the first time. You want to just make sure that what people in the past have described is there. So you go and you do basic work programs, just basic prospecting, basic characterization. You notice what wasn't done in the past. And for example, at Hickey's Pond, one thing we noted that had not been done was just very basic channel sampling across the outcrop. There'd been chipped channels, people just had, chipped away at rocks here and there. And people knew there was high grade on surface, but nobody had done a sawed channel. So that was the first thing we did. And that was the first work program. This was late 2018 that showed, mineable looking widths and grades at surface. That was what gives you the confidence to go to the next step then, to the next phase of exploration. The IP survey followed that. And that started to show a really nicely defined chargeability anomaly that's located along the showing and goes off 7 kilometers both directions. When you start to see that, you're like, okay, now we have a large footprint. We have a showing on surface. There's not a lot of rock exposure, but where we do have the rock exposure, we have this great showing that has mineable looking widths and grades at surface. You have the chargeability anomaly, which now looks like a large district scale anomaly, like it's multiple kilometers long. And you don't know when you're looking for a high sulfidation epithermal, where is the center of it? Where's the best part? At that point, really the only thing that's going to help us is the drill bit. So we were at a stage in like early 2020 where we said we need to do a scout drill program, just a brief proof of concept to show that there's mineralization, that it has continuity to depth, that it has potential for continuity long strike, and that it has the potential to be economic. So those 7 drill holes we put in 2020, I think demonstrated that over several hundred meters where we tested the system, we had this broad zone of mineralization, which is bearing gold, which is in that sort of gram range, which looks like amenable to open pit mining. And that's really now at a stage, that's the stage we were at in early February when we started this year's program, where we have now a large tonnage target to try to define. And that's the challenge, is to define that as quickly as you can.
So what's the timeline you're looking at? Like quickly as you can. It of course, like ideal world takes millions and millions of dollars.
Sure.
Is that the ideal scenario? Like as quickly as you can? Like
I think
you're drilling 10,000 meters now. That's
the plan for this year. Yeah. So we have a treasury now that can drill that this year. What I'd like to accomplish overall, I'd like to have an initial maiden resource published on Hickey's Pond within 18 months. I think that's a reasonable target. It gives us the time to do the metallurgy work. It lets us time to do a solid, large-scale drill program and get enough information there to hopefully publish an inferred resource, maybe even with some tonnage as well. What we can do this year is we can get a good start on that. It's clear we'll have to approach the markets again to do an additional financing to get to that overall resource. That's likely to require 20 drilling. But I think what we can do this year, get a good stab at it, and certainly show on the back of the envelope the potential, what that resource might have a chance of looking like.
Explain the drill targets right now. You've drilled 2,000 meters. Like, where have you drilled along? Like, how far did you step out? Like, are you really testing the full anomalies, like the full 2 kilometers, the whole enchilada, or just like, okay, we're focusing on the 200-meter section that we had earlier? Or Can you run us through that, the
Yes.
targeting a bit?
So the holes that we did in 2020 were quite broadly spaced. You know, we put a couple right on the little knob, like we call the knob showing, which is the old showing. We put a couple there, and then we stepped across the little pond, and then we moved along strike like 300 meters in one direction to test the overall that footprint, just to see is the system still there, and it's still there. Now what we've done is now we've started drilling it on a resource basis. So we've come in and now we're drilling systematic drill sections. So sections every 100 meters, you know, 2 or 3 drill holes per section, with the objective that now what the information we'll get out of that will be directly inputs into a resource model. So it's systematic exploration.
How deep are you drilling?
At the moment, we're only testing to sort of about that 200-meter vertical, because it's an open pit target. So we need to be testing that open pit depth first and foremost. Eventually, there'll be deeper holes, because of course you're interested about feeder systems. You want to see what it looks like deeper down. But
that's more of a phase 2, phase 3 kind of hole kind of situation.
I think so. That's the upside. Once you start to see the potential for that open pit resource, now you need to start drilling it out, you know, on a more exploration basis, along strike, further down, testing those sort of splay structures that you see, or any of the funny things you see in the geophysics, or, you know, then you're on to really looking for the icing on the cake. But you need to show the potential for the bulk tonnage target first.
Gotcha. I just saw a press release. You put out, or you completed 2,000 meters of the 10 already. Yeah. How did that go? Can you give us a bit of feedback how the or how the campaign is progressing? How difficult is it for you? Lab turnaround, big buzzword, of course. Are you using Eastern Analytical?
Yeah.
Oh, why? Everybody's using them. Stop caulking up the labs.
Well, Eastern is the closest lab, first of all.
Springdale.
You know, yeah, it's in Springdale, so it's easy to get to. You know, we did a comprehensive sort of round robin testing with them before we started, to make sure we had confidence. I mean, that's part of our QA program, is you always start with, we sent a bunch of you know, certified reference materials, so standards, that you get analyzed, and then you get the results back, and then you can ascertain. You say, yep, then right on the money, exactly where they need to be, performing well. They're also still the fastest lab, really, I think, these days in turnaround. I mean, you know, they don't. They offer a limited number of types of services, but the ones that they offer, they're pretty quick.
I heard they slowed down, actually.
Well,
I heard they slowed down compared to last year, even just a tad. Like
they've slowed down compared to last year, but so has everybody. So it's you kind of pick your poison.
So what's the turnaround time for you, roughly?
Right now, well, we haven't
put out any reholds yet.
No.
So what is it looking like right now? Do you expect to put anything out right after our conversation?
No, I don't have any results yet. I would put them out today if I had them. No, when I had a conversation with their lab manager when we submitted our first batch, we submitted our first batch of samples. I think it was February. Is when
Valentine's Day package.
Yeah. And at that point, they were looking at, I think they were looking at 4 to 6 weeks on a rush service, and something like 6 to 12 weeks standard. So what we've done is we've rushed the first several batches, because I understand right now, you know, shareholders want news. News is going to drive volume, all the rest of it. So we've
Can
rushed,
I jump in?
Yeah,
real quick.
Absolutely.
Is that the only reason you rushed them?
Is that, well, I mean, we're seeing things that we expect to see. We're seeing, and I put that out in the press release. We're seeing high sulfidation alteration in every hole drilled to date. We're seeing something that's consistent with the geological model for what we so far understand the geometry of the alteration zone be. We can't predict grade. It's not one of these situations where you look at the core. It's not like a nickel project where you can, you know, predict probably to 1 decimal place sometimes.
Well, you got the XRF scanner also telling you what's going on for those base metal projects.
And usually. For gold, you don't have that. So I there's nothing we can say until the assays come back. But yeah, so far we're seeing something consistent with the geological model. It looks interesting to me. I mean, we're seeing some of the rock types we saw. The nice thing is, because we had a drill program in 2020, we know what the assays were for those rock types and for those alteration signatures. So we're seeing, you know, broadly comparable rock types now, broadly comparable alteration zones that look coherent and that are, you know, consistent cross sections. And so, you know, I mean, I have hope that we're going to get some good numbers, but you know, until the numbers come in, you can't tell.
Yeah, but the drill campaign is continuous, so you're continuously drilling. You're not waiting for those results to come back to refocus or retarget or anything.
The timing's actually pretty good, because Newfoundland in the spring, almost everybody in Newfoundland just stops drilling in the spring. It's the breakup period. It gets sloppy, muddy. you don't really want to be out there. The drill companies don't want to be out there. So most people take a break during the breakup period. So that could be on the Burin Peninsula where we are, probably mid-March until probably mid-April. So that'll be a break for us. We're going to shut down the drill in the next couple of weeks. Once the drilling conditions get tough, where you're starting to just waste more time trying to get places than actually drilling, we'll stop it there, and that'll be a nice kind of convenient break for us, because then we'll be able to get those samples out to the markets, let the markets digest that, what the results look like, and we'll be back again in the summer, probably starting in late May, for the full summer program, where we'll bring in a second drill now, and that'll be where we'll start to hit some of those other targets on the property. It's a large property, and there's a lot of other targets. So that summer program will be the one where we really start to drill out the resource that we'll hopefully start to see at Hickey's Pond, and all of those outbound targets, which are all upside, and all targets that have never seen a drill bit before.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so news flow. What are we looking at? Drill results, obviously. Anything that you're going to throw at us in the meantime? You said you started Metwork, or you're about to start Metwork?
Yeah, we have. We're in conversations now just to do some early scale characterization, gold deportment studies, or maybe bench scale tests, just to get an idea of what we're going to be looking at. That's not necessarily germane for a resource, but it will be for, say, a preliminary economic assessment or something like that. So you need to get a handle on that early on. Definitely be working on that throughout the summer. In terms of news flow, I mean, my commitment to shareholders is to share news often and as frequently as we have results. So, as batches arrive, they'll be communicated to the markets for sure. I put out a release a couple days ago, just announcing what our progress was, just with the understanding that the assay labs are clogged up, and you want people to see that you're progressing. And so I think that, for a new drill project, we're doing really well. Like, I mean, I think it was 26 days, drilled over 2,000 meters. That's 83 meters a day, including drill moves and everything else. Like, that's good production.
That's a very good average.
Yeah. So like we're making progress. We're drilling good holes. We're seeing interesting alteration in the holes. The sample's already at the lab. Now it's just a waiting game to see when we get them back. But when we get them back, we'll start putting out news regularly based on, as the batches arrive, we'll just.
Fantastic, David. I really appreciate you coming into the studio.
Yeah,
it's a great conversation. Like, really, it's like, thanks for being my guinea pig here. Get some kinks to work out. Work processes, like, as you might have seen, like, are not 100% ideal yet. Still figuring stuff out, reconfiguring stuff, and like I'm on at war with this thing. So
we'll figure it out for the next one.
Oh, we will. No, everybody else, I really appreciate. Let me switch camera real quick. I set this up here. There we go as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This was SF Live, episode 244, as David announced. Full disclaimer, we are shareholders of the company. We bought the IPO into the private placement, the $7 million round. Looking forward to some results coming out of Newfoundland there. It's going to be quite exciting. And thanks for tuning in. Give us a like, give us a follow, and all that good stuff here. Hit it on YouTube, hit it on Twitter. Really appreciate it, especially the likes, because they do help with the YouTube algorithm. And if you are an early stage shareholder, or if you just want to see the company succeed, hit that like button. Other investors will be able to see that video as well, and it helps with. Thanks so much. We'll be back with more live content from the new studio.